Year 10, I hope you are well and welcome to this lesson where we are going to be looking at how to answer a 9-mark question, which is a bit of a treat for you, I know, because I know how much you love them and you will be filled with joy at the idea of doing a 9-marker. Now, the content for this 9-mark question is the stuff that we looked at over the last couple of lessons. So the ways in which there are environmental challenges in London and what is being done to overcome those challenges. So here is the title for the essay. For the 9-mark question. So it's evaluate the effectiveness of an urban transport scheme or schemes that you have studied. Okay. So we are focusing on just one of those environmental problems, and that environmental problem is urban transport. So our study obviously is the City of London, and the transport schemes that we have looked at, well, there's 3 of them. We have looked at those Santander cycles that you can hire for short journeys, also known affectionately as Boris bikes. We have looked at the building of the cycle superhighway, and we have looked at the congestion charge. And those 3 things together are ways that they have tried to develop in London to reduce the amount of transport that's on the roads, okay, reduce the amount of traffic and reduce the amount of cars. And in that way, they will be making the roads safer, making the air clearer and cleaner, reducing health risks, things like that. So with the question, it asks you to evaluate the effectiveness. So you need to ask, well, what does that mean? And if you are evaluating the effectiveness of those schemes, you are explaining whether or not you think those schemes work. So you have to understand what the schemes are trying to do. And that's what we've got here with these bullet points. So these schemes are trying to reduce the amount of traffic, the amount of cars on the road. By doing that, they will shorten journey times, okay? They will make the air cleaner and they will make the roads safer. So we are looking at environmental improvements and also social improvements, improvements that will improve people's health, improvements that will make people's quality of life better. Now, it makes sense for you to write about the Santander cycles and the cycle superhighway at the same time, because they are both ways that Transport for London is trying to get people out of their cars and get them onto bikes. So they kind of fit together. So you would start the paragraph where you wrote about the Santander cycles and the cycle superhighway by saying how effective you think they are. So you need to ask yourself, do they do what they are supposed to do? Okay. Do they make people more likely to use bikes? Do they shorten the journey times? Do they make the air clearer? Have they made the roads safer for people? And you will need to add evidence to prove your point of view. So you're going to need to remember some of those things that you wrote about last lesson, and we'll have a little review of that in a moment when we look at a writing frame. And you're going to need to use that information to back up your point of view. What you don't want to do is start the paragraph by saying, oh yeah, well, I think the Santander cycles and the cycle superhighway are brilliant and they've worked really well, and then only have negative things to say about them in your paragraph. Okay, you need to back up what you put at the start with what you put as the content of your paragraph. And so then the next thing you're going to write about is the congestion charge. Okay, so you're writing about more than one method of changing the transport. And again, you need to ask yourself, is it effective? Does it do what it is intended to? Do you think the congestion charge reduces traffic? Are there any problems with it? Okay, does it penalise anybody? Does it make things worse in any sort of situation? And again, you will need evidence to back up your point of view. So let's have a little look at how you could structure your answer. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at a structure that you could use to answer this question. So you would start off by very clearly writing what you have studied and where you have studied it. So I have studied transport in London in the UK. Okay, brilliant. You then put very clearly what the transport scheme is. And the first transport scheme that you're going to write about is encouraging the use of bikes. So here we've got one of the transport schemes is encouraging the use of bikes with the cycle superhighways and the Santander cycles which can be hired. Okay, so straight away you've shown the examiner what your case study is. And then we have got, I think these, and then this is where the writing frame kind of ends, and you need to put in your own ideas. So you're going to be saying how effective you think they are. So you're going to be putting, I think these have been good schemes to reduce the traffic, or I think these schemes have been quite good, but that there are still problems with them. Or if you think they haven't worked at all, you'll be putting, I think these schemes haven't worked very well because. So whatever you put, you then need to back it up with evidence. So my personal opinion, if I was answering this question, would be to put that I think overall they have been effective, but that improvements still need to be made. Okay, so if we look at the Santander cycles first, the benefits of those Santander cycles, the way that they are good, you've got things like they are cheap, they're very cost effective, okay? They are very convenient because they're good for short journeys. So that encourages people to leave their cars at home, especially when you think about how expensive parking your car is in London, okay? So, if you can just pay £2 for a quick bike journey to park your car in London, costs a huge amount of money. You can be looking at up to 50 quid a day to use some of the car parks. So really good value for money with Santander cycles. Obviously, if you're cycling, that's a green form of transport. You are not creating any pollutants that you're putting into the atmosphere. You're not producing the nitrogen dioxide or anything like that would harm people's health. So those would be good things about the Santander cycles. I suppose negatives, some people have criticised them by saying that there aren't enough, that they're not always conveniently located, and that the bikes themselves can be a bit clunky, that too many of them have been vandalised or too many of them have been broken. Okay. When it comes to the cycle superhighways, you can write about how that has changed a lot over time. So if you remember that when we looked at the videos, they talked about how the cycle superhighway now is separated from the main traffic by concrete or by those pillars and railings. Wasn't always like that. If you remember last lesson, I showed you some pictures where the cycle superhighway used to just be a blue stripe going across the ground, okay? And that when the cycle superhighways first opened in 2013, there was a lot of accidents. 9 people were killed in the opening days of Cycleway 2, okay? So initially there was a lot of complaint about the cycle superhighways, that they didn't join up, that the cyclists weren't protected. And some of those are still valid, okay? Although a lot of the cycle superhighways are now separated with barriers and concrete posts, that's not true for the whole journey, okay? So if you're trying to get from one place and get to another, it could be that whilst you'll be on a safe bit for some of it, for another little section, you'll be with the main traffic again before you get to another section that's nice and sort of tucked away and safe. You can also talk about those quiet ways when you're looking at the cycle superhighways and how a lot of work has been done in order to stop cars driving around those roads, okay, where bollards and raised platforms have been put at the end of the roads so cars can't get down them, and that the quiet ways are now really good ways to cycle around different neighbourhoods. You can include facts and figures, okay? So there's things like there being 40 miles of quiet ways now. The fact that cycling in central London had increased by 253%. So you've got a good range there of things you could write about where the cycle superhighways and Santander cycles are effective and working and where they aren't. When you're writing about ways that they're not effective, you could write about how they talked about how the cycling was still dominated by men, how there were fewer women doing it and very few children because there were still concerns about safety. You could write about how sometimes tourists would complain that the cycle superhighways were full of people who live in London and know London and are cycling very quickly, and if you're a tourist and maybe you want to cycle a bit more slowly, or you're out with your kids and you want to cycle a bit more slowly, you can't always do that. Okay, so there's positives and negatives to the Cycle Superhighway and Santander cycles. Okay, so when you've finished writing about that paragraph, you would then write about the congestion charge, and again, how effective you think that scheme is. So to remind you, the congestion charge, the way it works, all the roads going into that central London area that are included in the congestion charge have got cameras on them, and they do number plate recognition, and then you have to go online and you have to pay the congestion charge if you have driven into London. Now, the congestion charge is pretty expensive. It costs you £15 in order to take your car into the congestion zone. So obviously that is going to put a lot of people off. So in that way, yes, it is effective. It stops some people from using their car to go into central London, and they think, right, you know, I'll get the bus, I will get the tube, I'll share a car with a friend. So in that way, you could argue that it is effective. And then the less traffic there is in that central area of London, the less traffic jams there are, the less cars there are stuck on the road, the less pollutants there are going up into the atmosphere. However, there have been criticisms against the congestion charge, and one of the main ones is that if you are wealthy, the congestion charge isn't really something that's going to put you off, but that it affects people who are on a budget more than it affects people who are very wealthy. So it's a way in which the wealthy people can carry on doing what it is that they want to do and don't have to think about environmental consequences, whereas people who are on more of a budget are the people who have to make the changes. That is one of the big criticisms of the congestion charge. It's also the fact that, you know, if you are running a business or something like that and you need to get vehicles to your shop or to your place of work, again, the congestion charge isn't going to stop you from doing that, because if you've got a delivery of goods that you need, then the congestion charge isn't going to change the fact that you need to get those goods to your shop in order that you can sell them. So some people argue that the congestion charge doesn't have as much of an impact as it should do or it could do. Okay, so I recommend that before you start to do this this question, you have a look at the previous lesson. Okay, you have a little look through the video and pause it in certain points and get some of the facts and figures and things like that written down, and then you have a go at writing your 9 marker. Okay, if you are doing this during the lesson, then obviously you are going to be able to contact me, because I will be available with any questions that you've got. If you are not doing this live and you're not doing it when the lesson is running, if you're stuck, you're going to have to send me a message either on Teams or on email, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So good luck with this. I will be marking it for you and giving you a grade, and if it's no good, okay, and I don't think that you have worked effectively on it, I will be asking you to do it again. So make sure it is a decent piece of work, because that way you're only going to have to do it once. Okay, so good luck with it, and don't forget to ask me if you need any support with it. Okay, thanks, Year 10.